Boker Tov, Chavrim, I'm Stephen Benoon. You're watching Israeli News Live. Tensions are growing in Israel between Israel and Russia. Not so much between Israel and Syria, it's actually Israel and Russia. And this is going to be something that's going to shock you. We did a little bit of digging after seeing the article put out by Debka File this morning. Thanks to Brother Roddy Brown that shared this information with me, as he shared with me this morning things that he is already seeing there on the ground in Israel. A call-up of forces in Israel. Also reported here on Debka File there that the reserves are being called up and put on standby and training again for possible military confrontation there in the Golan Heights there. It says Israeli-Russian clash over Hezbollah's Golan grab. The Israeli drone that targeted the Syrian militiaman Yasser Sayad outside the Golan town of Kenetra on Sunday, March 19th, reinforced the message first carried by the Israeli Arrow 2, which shot down a Syrian SA-5 anti-air missile on Friday. The Israeli ambassador was called twice to the Russian Foreign Ministry and, according to Debka File, was sternly warned about intervening inside of Syria. Notice what the article states here. After the Israeli strike, the ambassador to Moscow, Kerry Koren, was summoned to the Russian Foreign Ministry to hear a warning from the Deputy Foreign Minister, Mikhail Bogdanov, to stop interfering with Russian plans for Syria. Syria's UN ambassador, Bashar al-Jafari, reflected the Assad regime's sense of empowerment when he said following the Israeli airstrikes in northern Syria, their Syrian response was appropriate and changed the rules of the game. He claimed that Israel had been sternly warned by Moscow to stop such attacks, and therefore, as the article goes on to state there, therefore its leaders will think long before taking similar action in the future. Well, it didn't go over too well with Israel. Wasn't long after that that Israel once again carried out another raid inside of Syria. And again, Israel's ambassador to Russia was summoned by the Russian government again and again. Another, as the article in Debka File calls it, a dress down, another very stern warning by Russia. Now, we might think that that's really not that big of a deal. And I know many people are going to start thinking when it comes to prophecy, they're going to start thinking, well, Russia's being drug into the battle. We're looking at over in Ezekiel 38, the hook is in the jaw of Russia and being brought down to the battle. But you have to remember, Russia is not Gog of Magog. And what's more interesting is that the one that is being drug into the battle here is the United States. Looks like the bait on the hooks, and remember, it's hooks plural and jaws plural. And as I've stated all along, I believe that's a NATO contingent that'll be brought into this battle. But it's actually the United States that has returned to the region, because according to the prophecy in Ezekiel, we find out that it is a return. They leave, they come back. Daniel clears that up for us a little bit in Daniel's prophecy there, speaking about the king of the north and the king of the south and how they're pushing at one another there. But what happens there? Now the U.S., according to this article here that came out about a week ago here on the New York Times, U.S. is sending 400 more troops to Syria. Well, according to the prophecy of Ezekiel, they will come with all of his bands and everything else, all of his military powers with, well, let's just look at what it says here. He says to him, set thy face toward Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal, and prophesy against him and say, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. And I will turn thee about and put hooks in thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth in all thy army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed most gorgeously, a great company with buckler and shield, and all of them handling swords. Persia, Cush put with them, all of them with shield and helmet, and Gomer and his bands. See? So we're seeing all these different groups that are coming in, and notice all the different types of military uniforms. This clearly is like a NATO force. Now, some might argue, and I'll be neutral in that regard, it could be Russia that's being brought down into the battle, that they are the king of the north, and they are the Gog of Magog, but many scholars disagree with that. They believe that Turkey has a lot to do with this. Of course, Turkey and Russia have aligned themselves together. So there could be one way or the other. So I'll kind of stay neutral in that point. I realize it could be NATO, and I also realize it could be Russia and Turkey together. But when I see Donald Trump returning, I don't look at Trump as being God myself, but I do look at the Vatican itself, who runs the NATO forces, being the leader, that the Lord has a bone to pick with, we might say there. Unfortunately, President Trump just happens to be in the middle of the whole quagmire and bringing the troops back down in there. But that's what I'm looking at, is that NATO was once there. They were there fighting. The Iraq War came in there under the leadership of President Bush and then also under Obama. They have waged war all throughout the Middle East there. And then finally, Obama began to draw back all the forces out of the Middle East. And suddenly there's been under President Trump, now the forces are beginning to come back into the Middle East. Now, but let's take a serious look at this, at what I'm talking about, because as I'm saying here, Debka File is warning that Russia is warning Israel, but in Russian news, something altogether different is going on. And this is something on mignews.ru. I got it translated here for you in English, courtesy there, I guess you'd say, of Google Translate there. But Putin has warned Israel of supplying arms to Ukraine. All right, it's almost as if NATO is just throwing Israel in the middle of all this in order to stir the pot, almost like Israel is the bait on the hook, so to speak. Says deliveries of Israeli weapons in Ukraine will lead to further round of confrontation, increasing the number of victims of the conflict, said the president of Russia, commenting on the statements by Israel of possible arms supplies to Kiev in response to the supply of the S-300 to Iran, according to RIA Novosti. I mean, it's really tit for tat. Now, that you might say, well, that has nothing to do with Israel and Russia right there around the Golan and Syria and what's going on there. Well, let me share with you just a little bit more serious news that also came out back in late January, right there, the 1st of February, only a little over a month ago. Putin threatened Israel and Saudi Arabia to use tactical nuclear weapons in response to the invasion of Syria. Imagine that one. Now you wonder why President Trump has troops on the ground inside of Israel. When you start throwing around, and this is on Novosti, a very well-respected Russian news source here. When you start getting threats like that against Israel and President Trump willing to stand for Israel, you can count on one thing: Trump is not just going to sit back by idly. According to the information of Portal Real News, a source close to the President Vladimir Putin informed a famous journalist, Robert Perry, that Putin had warned Israel that any attempt to invade Syria would be met with the use of tactical nuclear weapons in the battle. You remember right here on Israeli News Live, and people just thought I was in a nutcase for even bringing this out, but we reported that when Prime Minister Netanyahu had met with President Putin back right here in this January time frame, when he had made that quick trip over there to Moscow. He made that offbeat comment at the close of his meeting there that Israel may be getting ready to invade Syria. Now, I think that was actually maybe December, if I'm not mistaken on that, because you got to remember, at that time, it was still President Barack Hussein Obama. And I said to you that I believe that what he was doing was trying to let Putin know what he is being forced into doing under former President Barack Obama, that no doubt the U.S. was trying to force his hand into a conflict with Syria in order to draw the battle, in order to try to take down Syria, and that Israel is just being used as a pawn. He actually warned the president, and people thought, well, Steve, that's crazy. He would have never said that. Well, now you're finding out in Novosti that Putin warned Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as the Saudis, that if they were to even think of invading Syria, he will use tactical nuclear weapons as in response to that war. Now watch what he says he'll do. The threats, he says here, Perry was awarded forget that one there. The threats of Saudi Arabia and Turkey on land and invasion have increased over the past month. concurrent with the final stage of negotiations on a political settlement in the Syrian conflict, which is to turn will frustrate the plans of the group that insisted on changing the regime in Syria. The Vice President Joe Biden said during his speech at Harvard in 2014, Israel and Saudi Arabia have invested hundreds of millions of dollars and thousands of tons in everyone who is ready to fight against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, including the front of al-Nusra and al-Qaeda, and well as extremists and jihadists from all over the world. Now, but he states here, tactical nuclear weapons on a non-strategic nuclear weapons are ammunition to destroy the large targets and concentrations of the enemy forces on the front and immediate rear. That distinguishes it from strategic nuclear weapons, which refers to ammunition and which has a greater destructive power. Israel and Russia is in a major standoff right now. And I don't know who's pushing the buttons inside of Israel that is causing the Israelis to become the bait on the hook here. I don't like seeing Israel being placed up there. Just, it's troubling. It's very troubling, friends. Very troubling to me indeed. And you know, to see the things that are escalating right now, to find out that in Israel they're already pulling up the reserves, young men being brought up, young women being brought up, getting prepared for a battle, a conflict. And of course, the Golan being that strategic location. And of course, Russia is right there in the middle of it all. And I can't say that Russia, this will be a good thing either, but it's almost as if the United States, Saudi Arabia, Israel, all the ones that have been fighting against Syria, they're not going to let this end. They're going to try to take this back. I think of the scripture in Daniel's prophecy where it says, tidings out of the east and out of the north and out of the east will trouble him. And that's the king of the north. Now again, remember, that king of the north, it's not the president of the United States, it's not President Putin, and it's not President Trump. It's, you know, the king of the north, in my opinion, is the leader there in Rome. And that's when I believe that it's pulling the strings in this. And so we're really getting to a place now, it's almost like they're not going to allow this to happen for President Putin to prop up President Bashar al-Assad. The plan was to take down these nations, according to General Wesley Clark. They were going to take them down. Syria was one of them. And so for Russia to go in there and to prop up Syria, it's not going to happen. And Turkey, who has been playing along with Putin, making Putin think that they're his ally, I believe is just the opposite way around. Turkey is not an ally of Russia. They're only playing Russia. It was there all along. The coup was put there in order to bring the troops and equipment there in the northern part of Syria. And now that they're there, now the U.S. is there, Russia is going to be the target, right along with Syria. And again, that was because tidings out of the north and out of the east, they troubled the king of the north. But he's bringing all of his bands in. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Be very interesting to see what's going to happen next, but I can certainly see Damascus will definitely end up being a ruinous heap in a battle like this. There's just no winners in a game like this. Anyway, we'll be in Israel this week. We definitely do need your help and support in doing that. So if you would like to contribute, you can go to our website, IsraeliNewsLive.org, and contribute there online, or right here on our YouTube channel, right there, right above when you go to the main page when you log in. Just log out of the video, just go into Israeli News Live on YouTube there. You'll see a donate button right there on just above the subscribe button, and you can help support this work there. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live.